What's up, everybody? I'm DJ Sixsmith. Welcome to Sit Down. Joe List here with us. Brand new special for Comedy Central. I hate myself. What's up, Joe? How are you?
I'm good. How are you, man? Thanks for having me.
You got it. I'm doing really well. Good time for you with the special coming out. Listen, we're all looking for stuff to watch. We need laughs right now. What was it like putting this thing together?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was strange because when I filmed it on March 2nd and people were aware of COVID or Corona at the time, but I did not anticipate the entire planet shutting down 10 days after I shot it. So it's sort of a strange time capsule in a way. I'm talking about flying and, interacting with people. So it's a little weird, but I think it might be one of the last specials to come out because I was one of the last ones to shoot it. So it was pretty great. It was fun. It was a fun process, and it's been fun throughout this time to know that I had it coming.
How many people were watching you shoot that special?
Probably about 225 or something like that in that neighborhood, between 175 and 225. I don't know exactly what it holds.
And then think about how much the world changed in like 2 weeks. I mean, that's how small the timeline was between when you shot it and even when New York just changed dramatically.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, the night before like the NBA shut down and everyone started to close up, I was at Madison Square Garden at the Big East tournament. And at the time, people were saying, like, I wouldn't go there. That seems crazy. And I was like, you're nuts. And I was at the Garden, and I remember thinking, like, I mean, it was a light crowd relatively, but there was 10,000 people there. And
it's stunning how much changed because those college tournaments were going on, and we're like, yeah, they're going to be played. Like, nothing's wrong. And then one by one, it was like the Big East, the ACC, they all just got shut down.
Yeah, it was pretty wild because I also remember thinking, hey, I don't mind quarantining. It's March Madness. This is going to be great. I'll just watch basketball. I'll see every minute of every game. And then they took that away, and I was like, hey, wait a second.
And they're like, this isn't as great as I thought it would be.
No.
Not so much.
Plus the death.
Yeah, that too. On top of everything else.
It was also a bummer.
Definitely a bummer. Well, you go into a lot of different places in your comedy special. We get a little Aunt Betty, anxiety talk, just your whole road here. What was most important to you to focus on with this special?
I just wanted to capture, like, I'm on the road, or I was on the road all the time. I'm a road dog, so I'd do 45 weeks on the road, and usually, you have one show Thursday, 2 Friday, 2 Saturday, sometimes a Sunday show, and it's a lot of shows, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it, and I just wanted to capture that feeling. That was the main goal, was to get the feeling of one show, just a regular stand-up show in a club, not a big theater, not anything. I wasn't trying to change anybody's life or anything like that, just a fun hour of comedy. So to me, that was kind of the goal, and just make sure the sound was right and people could see me, and just kind of a bare bones comedy special, a little, almost like a documentary of a show.
Just keeping it really simple is what it sounds like. Just focus on the material, because there's so much glitz and glamour, and even focusing on the platform, but it seems just like you were focused on the content, which I think ultimately is the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Rock said, not to me, in an interview, he was like, you should shoot a special in the venue you most often perform. And so that was my home club, because sometimes you see these comedy specials and there's a big swinging crane camera and there's like smoke being blown and like crazy lights. And I didn't want any of that. Just kind of like, here's Joe at the Comedy Cellar. And I think we captured it really well. Jason Katz is the director, and he nailed exactly what I wanted. And he did a great job.
What do you like the most about performing at the Cellar?
What I did like about the Cellar.
Yeah, we should put it in the past tense at this point, right?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, they'll be back. They're the best. The Comedy Cellar is, what I love about it is, and this is a good model for all the comedy clubs out there because a lot don't do it. They put the comedians first, above even their own wait staff, above the customers, above everything, as far as like feeding the comics, paying the comics, making sure they're comfortable, making sure they monitor the audience. They put everyone's phones in little plastic bags. I mean, they just do an amazing job. And also the physics, if that's the right word of it, the brick, the low ceiling, the basement, all the stuff that is considered death traps now. But it's like a low, small stage. Everyone's right on top of you. And I love the brick. Like I said, the low ceiling. And both the Comedy Cellar and Village Underground are underneath the ground. So it has that cool factor of walking underneath. And it's just, it's magical. It's a great place.
When did the whole phone in bags thing start up in terms of people coming and checking out shows?
I think I don't know. The Cellar started doing it. I'm so bad with time. There's so many things that I'm like, I think that was 6 months ago, and people are like, that was 4 years ago. So I don't know exactly. Maybe a year ago or 6 months ago. I think Dave Chappelle started doing it first on the road, and then some bands started doing it. And then the Cellar started doing it. I think maybe 6 months ago. Oh, 6 months from when the world ended. I mean, 6 months plus the 6 months. So a year ago now, I guess. But it's great, and I think the first club I knew about doing it was the Denver Comedy Works, which is another amazing club. They had been doing it for quite a while, for like a couple years, I think. And it's a great idea because I think it puts the audience actually at ease, and it makes it easier for the comics for sure.
Yeah, it's a two-way street because obviously you can try out your material without having to think about it going out to social media or on the internet. And then people who are there, like, you've paid to be at a comedy show. You don't need to be on your phone. You just lock into what's going on. It kind of works both ways when I think about it.
Yeah, totally. And to me, not having access to your phone puts you a little bit at ease. Like knowing that you can look at your phone, even right now, I know my phone is right here. And there's part of me that wants to be like, what's going on over there? So if you put it in the other room or downstairs or whatever it is, it just makes it a little bit like, all right, I don't have it. So it definitely helps for that factor too.
Why don't we take it back a little bit? Let's go back to growing up in Massachusetts. When does Joe List realize he's into comedy, and who are some of the people he likes watching?
I wanted to be, I first like kind of knew about comedy or wanted to be a comedian. It was George Carlin. My uncle showed me George Carlin. I think it was Doing It Again or Jamming in New York, one of those, like 1990, one of those HBO specials. And it was just so cool to me watching everyone else's reaction and knowing he was saying these insane things that you weren't supposed to say was such a neat thing to me. And my family was really into stand-up comedy. Louis Anderson and Gallagher and Elaine Boozler and Bill Cosby. And there was a lot of like the whole family hanging out watching old stand-up. Well, they were new at the time, but those stand-up videos on VHS. We would go to the store and rent one. Like you would go rent the, Bill Cosby tape and bring it home and pop it in. And it was great. That was before we knew that he was a horrible person, whatever. But and it was magical. It was like the most happy I ever saw my family. So I think internally or subconsciously, I was like, or even consciously, I guess, was like, boy, that would be nice. I'd like to be that guy. And so that it was definitely an early age. It was like, boy, I want to do that. That seems fun.
And you've been doing it for a minute also, because this is right out of high school for you, right? You just jumped right into the scene.
Yeah. So I graduated in 2000, June of 2000. I went on stage the first time in October of 2000. So coming up on 20 years now, which is strange to think.
What do you remember about that first performance?
It was at Chops Lounge in Boston, which is now like a fancy hotel bar. I mean, that whole area is so nice. I don't even recognize Fenway when I go home now, but it was like a little open mic, and it was like a true open mic. Anybody could just walk in and sign up and go on. And the guy was like, hey, do you want to go first? And I said, sure. I didn't know anything. I was like, great, get it over with. And I did some like really bad jokes, but they were jokes, I said, I went to a Celtics game. There was a lot of empty seats for a team called the Celtics. And that was my joke. And it's not great, but it was a joke. And it went pretty well. I mean, people laughed. And I remember feeling good. And then this guy, Larry Lee Lewis, he was the host. He gave me his business card. And I remember that moment being like, I'm entering, like reaching for it and being like, I'm entering show business. I had somebody's card, and I don't think I ever contacted him, or he never contacted me. I mean, I would see him at the open mic, but I remember thinking like that went really well, and I'll be back next week. And I never missed a Wednesday after that. I was there every week. And so yeah, it was pretty good. And I remember people being like, that was good, man. And so I felt like I was good right away. Looking back, I mean, I was horrible, but relatively, I think it went pretty well.
What was it about the Boston comedy scene that you enjoyed the most? Because a lot of people talk about the New York scene, the LA scene. What makes Boston separate from the rest?
Boston was great because, first of all, there's so many great comics there, local comics, which I didn't understand the concept of local comics. I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought there was just the comics on TV. I didn't realize there was like these incredible comedians in Boston. And it's pretty low pressure because I didn't realize that then, but industry is not there. Like there's not TV people there. There's not movie people or whatever. So it felt relatively low pressure, but also great comics to learn from. There's so many amazing comics who are all still there. Don Gavin and Mike Donovan and Tony V and all these great guys who were really great to learn from. And it was competitive, but also very helpful. And the crowds are still great crowds, but also tough. I mean, they're not, you gotta bring it. You gotta have punchlines and lots of them. And I think that definitely shaped the way I still do comedy.
So when do you go from doing your thing in Boston to kind of taking things to the next step and being like, all right, I have a foothold in this industry. I can really do this as a career.
So I moved to New York in April of 2007, and it was sort of a thing. I always wanted to move to New York. I knew I was going to want to go to New York, or I did want to go to New York. And then it was relatively, I was afraid to go because I had worked my way up in Boston where I was opening for all the big headliners and starting to work. And I kind of had a reputation of being like one of the really strong young comics. So it was easy to get comfortable. I felt comfortable. I knew everybody and felt like people respected me. And then there was a couple comics that were like, we're going to move to New York. And I was like, I'll go with you. I'll move with you. Because I knew it was going to get harder and harder the more comfortable you get there. And so it was relatively on a whim with a comic named Dan Bulger, who's great. He lives up there again. And I said, all right, let's go. And so we went down. And then for the first year or so, I would drive back to Boston almost every weekend. Because when you come to New York, nobody cares. Like I thought I was going to show up and be like, I'm here, you know? And I had opened for like Dane Cook and Colin Quinn and Nick DePaul. I thought that meant something, and nobody cared. So
nobody had any idea, right?
Yeah. So I kept going back to Boston and being like, yeah, things down there are it's going great. And people that come back to Boston and say it's going great in New York they're probably lying, because they'd be doing something in New York if it was going great, you know?
What do you remember about opening up for Dane Cook at that point? Because a lot of people forget, like, he was a huge comedic star at that point in the 2000s.
Yeah, so I first opened for him 2004, July of 2004, and they were big shows for him, I know, because it was at the Cape Cod Melody Tent in Cape Cod, and then Hampton Beach Casino Ballroom in New Hampshire. And those were like 2,500 seat theaters. And to me, that was by far the biggest thing I had ever done. That was like insane to me at the time. And I think he was just starting to do those bigger rooms, and his parents were there, and I had really admired his comedy previously to that. He was kind of like my favorite comic. So it was insanely exciting to me. And it was fun. I mean, the crowds were pretty receptive. I wasn't that strong of a comic, but they were nice. And he was really nice to me, and his parents were really nice. So it was like magical. It felt, to me at the time, it felt like a turning point where I was like, all right, now I know what I'm doing. I just performed for 2,000 people and I met Dane Cook. So
that's a great story. I'm sure another great story is getting on all the late night shows. So what do you remember about that Letterman performance? Because that was kind of wedged in there right towards the end of his run.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. So that was an interesting story. So I had gone with my friend Gary Gulman, who's another great Boston comic. I went to Letterman with him, his taping. And it was kind of that thing of like, why couldn't I do this? I should try to do this, because I had always wanted to do Letterman, but never actually tried. I felt like I never got the manual on how to do comedy, so I never like attempted
just
to
figure it out as you go along, it seems like.
Yeah, exactly. So I met the bookers there with Gary, and he was like, this guy's hilarious. And they gave me their card, a lot of business card exchanges in my story. And so I put together a tape and started sending them a tape. And the way it works is they'll watch and go, take this joke out, you change this order. So I kept kind of responding. And then Dave announced that he was retiring, and I kind of stopped hearing from them, which was pretty heartbreaking, but kind of understandable. And then we didn't hear from him for like 3 months. And my manager at the time was like, I think we got to move on. But I was so attached to the idea of doing it that I said, tell them to write no. We haven't heard from him in 3 months. I want an email saying, just kidding, he can't do the show. Because at that point, it felt like I was going to do it. And I was like, I just want to know in writing. And the next email I got was, you've been approved. So it was almost like Shawshank Redemption, where he says, go stamp your papers. And then, so they were like, I got it. And I remember I was at Caroline's about to go on stage when I got the email. And I remember telling my friend, and he was like so pumped and gave me a big hug. And then the show was amazing. I mean, it was nerve-wracking, but then it was also pretty amazing. I mean, it was just an amazing experience. And I remember, kind of taking the elevator down to get ready to go on the stage and talking to the sound guy. When you do a late night show, you're the only one in the building that's nervous. Everybody else is just at work. And so I remember the sound guy or whatever he was, the guy that opens the curtain was just kind of like, "Oh, where are you from, man?" And I'm like about to go on. And I was like, "Shut up." And he's like, "Oh, you like the Patriots, huh?" I'm a Jets fan. I remember being like, "This is insane." But it actually helped because it took me out of the situation and kind of focused on that. And I remember it being really fun. Paul Schaefer is standing like 2 feet from you, so you can hear him laughing and kind of shuffling papers. And I remember being nervous, but also feeling great. And the crowd is just so hot, such a great crowd, and it was pretty magical. And then Dave came over, and unbelievable. It was a dream come true for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly one to check off on the bucket list, and certainly the special. You can add that to the list. What are some other moments in your career that you're like, that was pretty awesome, that was pretty cool, I got to do that?
Boy, Letterman definitely felt like the most magical sort of moment because it felt I felt like it's kind of a loser. I felt like I had been like a lovable loser. It was almost like the Red Sox in 04. I felt like this lovable loser that finally
you got your title.
It. You got your
championship.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really big. And I have to say the hour right now, I hit 500,000 views in under a week, and I'm really proud of it. I think it's the best thing I've done. So I think the night I taped it was really great because it just felt good. It just felt like the pressure was on and the show was great. So often you shoot things and you're like, I wish that was better. I flubbed that line. But that night I felt really great. And I remember going to the diner after with my wife and a couple other comics and just feeling like, whew, that was great. So those are definitely the ones that stick out the most, I think.
What's it like sharing the comedy situation with your wife?
It's good. I love it. I mean, there's some comics that were like, I would never date a comedian, but what's nice is we have a lot in common, obviously, not just on like a spiritual level or whatever, but also we know and we love and hate the same people. It's like, it helps the relationship to be like, a lot of times you're like, oh, Steve from work is a jerk. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember meeting that guy. Whereas this can be like, that guy we both know was the worst today. And you're like, oh yeah, he was the worst the other day too. I think the key to a relationship is hating the same people. That's what I'm saying.
You just group up together on somebody and then boom.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's great. We go on the road together and, we can bounce jokes off each other and it's pretty great. It works well.
So clearly sports is a common thread in our conversation. What are you checking out so far? Are you watching NBA? I mean, Red Sox, a little iffy this year. What's piquing your interest?
Yeah, the Red Sox stink. They're the worst team in the luckily the Pirates are worse, but they're the worst team in the American League. But I'm a huge hockey guy, so I'm all hockey. And the Bruins won yesterday in double overtime. And I think they play again tonight. So I'm watching hockey. The NBA, I watch a little bit. I'll try to watch the Celtics. I'm not as into the NBA. I was for a long time, and then just it's hard to. I'm working so much, or I used to be working so much that it's hard to follow multiple sports. So I watched a little bit baseball. The Red Sox stink, but hockey, I'm all in. That's my favorite of all of them.
How much do you miss being on the road? Because that's a huge chunk of your year that you're spending away from home. What's it been like being at home these last few months?
It's strange. There's a lot I don't miss about it. The flight, getting on the plane, getting off the plane, going through security. But now I've reached a moment where it's been so long that I am starting to even miss that, to be like, oh man. And I've gotten a little taste of doing some of these outdoor gigs where you drive and you do the show and then afterwards you get some food and you're talking to other comics and you're like, that makes me miss it. But I was getting a little burnt out, so it was nice to take the break. But it's weird. It's definitely different at 8:00 every night to be like, okay, what do we do now?
Or going into the weekend, you're like, I don't have multiple shows to prepare for or even think about.
Yeah, it's really strange. And like I said, there's a bunch of outdoor shows in New York now, but even that, it's like you do 1 10-minute show and then you're like, all right. Whereas before I would do 2-hour shows, 2 1-hour shows in a night. So it's definitely an adjustment. But after a while, I think everyone just adjusts and you settle back into whatever routine you start having.
Yeah, I think we've all done that, and now people can watch your whole special on YouTube whenever they want, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go check it out. It's called I Hate Myself on YouTube. And yeah, like I said, 500,000 people or 500,000 views. Some people have watched it multiple times. So it might be like 300 people that have just all watched it 100 times. But that was bad math. But yeah, please go add to that if you're hearing this.
Well, Joe, thanks so much for jumping on, man. Congratulations, and we'll talk to you down the road, all right?
Yeah, thank you. It was really fun. I appreciate you having me.